Season 2 is here. The 2025 high school hockey in Minnesota for girls. Wow, I can't wait to get into it. Hello, everyone. I'm Julian, and this is the Inside Scoop podcast. I've got a couple of fine gentlemen in the virtual studio with me today, Matt Harrington and Brandon Spratt, a couple of guys that have a ton of credibility in the high school hockey community. We're all play-by-play announcers, which is part of it. We've seen a lot of these talented teams play, but also I feel like we do a lot on the side in the background as well. So guys, welcome in. Thanks for joining me.
Thanks for having us, Julian. Appreciate it.
Great to be here.
Yes. I'm super excited. And yeah, this is the season preview. What can you guys expect? Well, we're going to try to keep this within an hour. I want to discuss some early season predictions for Miss Hockey. We could also touch on the Jory Jones Award a little bit. And then I want to move into some of the transfer off-season moves. We've had a number of those that I think are really interesting, and that's going to shake things up for sure. And then I want to discuss a handful of sections in both A and AA, which sections are going to be competitive and who we think are actually going to make it out of that respected section and make the state tournament. And then, of course, we'll finalize with a couple of teams we think for Class A and AA can win the state championship. A lot of this is speculation, of course. We're super early in the year. It hasn't even started. It's 5 days away from when we're recording this. So lots to happen, but I can't wait to dive into it. So we're going to go right away with the Miss Hockey early season predictions. So there's a lot of young women who are great. And this award, I think, is super prestigious when you look at last year's Mercury Bischoff for Grand Rapids Greenway, an outstanding athlete who's been now at Mankato State doing well. And then the Jory Jones last year, Layla Hemp out of Minnetonka, one of the state's best goalies, who's now playing for the Minnesota Gophers. So I can't wait to get into these awards. For Miss Hockey, my number one prediction, if I had to bet right now, I really like Maddie Kimbrell from Holy Fam. I think in terms of raw talent, she's one of the best in the state and probably in the country for her age. And also, sneak peek, she's now at Holy Family. She was at Orono last year. So I think playing with a top line of Holy Family, since Orono lost two of their top players to graduation from last year, I think is going to be really good for her. And plus just the environment, the team, the love that the fam has, I think is going to be great for her. And I expect her to do really big things. So right now, I'm going to start with her as my Miss Hockey prediction. Guys, what do you think? And then I want to hear some of your favorites for the preseason Miss Hockey.
Yeah, that's a great pick, Julian. Certainly, I think Maddie Kimbrell is going to make a huge impact to that Holy Family Fire Squad. And of course, head coach Randy Keppel aiming to try and get back to the state tournament for the second year in a row with his club. Of course, they got third last year. My preseason pick is sort of in that same area in terms of geography, but I'm going to go with Lorelei Nelson of the Edina Hornets, the Penn State commit, who I think has gotten just so much better from when we saw her just a couple of years ago playing on the Edina varsity team. I think her impact on the ice really as a two-way forward is so strong, and seeing her play has been a pleasure the last couple of years. And so I'm going to pick Lorelei Nelson as my Miss Hockey pick, but obviously there's a lot of other talented players that certainly could help out there as well.
Yeah, she's super talented, and the Hornets are always going to be one of the best in the state, and she had coming off a great year. I expect her to do great things. Very good pick. Brandon, your pick.
Yeah, it is a great pick, Matt, and I think going back a couple of years, that's been a player I've had an eye on in this class. The only thing with Edina, I just wonder sometimes with the point totals. Now, I think we would all agree point totals are not everything. I mean, the Hornets go deep in things, but along those lines, I'm going to stick with the theme of what we've seen the last couple of years with Miss Hockey. We've seen gaudy point totals. We've seen players from across the state getting some love. I'm going to head up close to the border. Jasmine Havda of Rosa will be my preseason Miss Hockey. They lost a couple players to St. Cloud State that put up big points, and Peyton Remick, Lily Erickson. So maybe teams key on her a little bit more to try to slow her down. Maybe it goes the other way, and Havda has to just kind of pick up more of that load. So I see Miss Hockey staying up north this year after Bischoff last year. I'll go with Havda of the Rams.
Yeah, for Breakdown Sports, I know she was the favorite for coaches predicting Miss Hockey this year. And I got to see her play. She's a phenomenal athlete. And with the loss of Remick and Erickson, I think that's going to be pretty difficult just because that's such a good top line. However, maybe she'll really have to step it up a notch for Roseau, and that we could maybe see her getting 2 to even 3 points a game. Well, we'll see. Those are all really good picks. And then now I want to move into the Jory Jones. I guess this there's maybe not as many numbers as Miss Hockey, but the one I've had my eye on for a while is out of up north, War Road, Peyton Raleigh. For them, I mean, the Warriors, they have just been an empire for girls Class A hockey for pretty much, it seems like, forever at this point. Last year, the state champs runner-ups. I mean, she is entering her senior year. I mean, she had 26 wins as a junior, 1.15 goals allowed per game. I mean, that's insane. A .943 save percentage. She's headed to the Gophers next year. And I think War Road is pretty much running it back from last year's team. I don't see why she can't win this award. I mean, there's no guarantees, but I think heading into the preseason, when you look at those numbers and when you look at just the entire team's success, and I think the success really relies on her at net, it's kind of hard to really make an argument against her right now. That's why I'm going to go with Rowley for my Jory Jones award.
Yeah, good pick, Julian. I think that's definitely a possibility. My pick is also going to be in Class A, but I'm going to keep it a little bit closer to the cities here and go with Janie McGaughan of the Blake Bears. We saw her quite a bit as part of the Dangle League this past year of high school players playing in the summer at Braemar Arena, and she was just consistently good night in and night out. A lot of what we saw in her high school career as well. Save percentages in the 940, 950 range. That's awfully impressive, especially at this level. So I think McGaughan is the front runner, at least for me, in terms of the Jory Jones Award. But yeah, that's why I'm going to go with Janie McGaughan of the Blake Bears.
Awesome. Great pick. Yeah, she's got to be one of the top 3 favorites for sure. Brandon, I have a hunch if you're going to pick someone different, who it's going to be. I think we all might know, but who's your pick for Jory Jones in 2025, 2026?
Well, I will. And I really think, Julian, I think you're absolutely right. I think if you had asked me last year, maybe at this time, to prognosticate a year ahead, we'd be looking at a 2-horse race, but Rowley has really gotten herself in that race, and the commitment to the University of Minnesota, I think, will help her cause. That said, I'm going to go with a player who will be playing across the border in a border battle in the future. That would be Holy Family's Kayla Swartout, committed to the University of Wisconsin, the Powerhouse program, and I think she'll one-up her mentor, Sedona Blair, and get that Jory Jones Award. Obviously, Sedona had an incredible career, continues to have an incredible career in college as well. But Sedona went up against Uma Cornier in her senior year. I think this will be the year that Holy Family, Coach Keppel, we mentioned it, the goaltender himself, he'll be very proud if one of his goaltenders can win this award. I think Swartout will get it done this year.
Yeah, it's very possible. I think she's hands down the top goalie in girls Double A this year. Another great pick. Yeah, I think between those 3, it's pretty obvious. If I really had to narrow it down, I think it'll be one of those 3. So all good picks. I want to move in now to the off-season moves, the transfers. We have a number of those this year, and some of them I think were pretty big. Others maybe not so much, but there's a little bit more recency that we've seen these young ladies go to different schools. I think a lot of it really has to do with winning state championships. I think when you look at, the previous school, hit my computer. The previous school that they played at versus where they're going to be headed to and playing this next year, I think it's like, okay, you have good teams. Now they're moving on to the best teams. I think the first one, just to kind of get out of the way, Lainey Gannett's Woodbury, to Centennial Spring Lake Park. She was the backbone of the Royals last year in her junior year. But then with her sister, unfortunately, it was tearing her ACL, right? Just to confirm, during the Dangle League. That's a huge injury. That's a huge blow to Woodbury. And although they weren't able to get past Hill Murray in their section finals, I think they still bring back almost everybody from last year's team. But the blow to Brooke, I think, is really tough to see for the Royals. And then her sister moves now to Centennial Spring Lake Park, a team who made the state tournament last year. They are the number 2 seed, and then were upset by the Rosemont Irish in the quarterfinals. But they return almost everyone back, with the exception of a couple of big-time players. But that's a very young team. And with the loss of Camp to the Tommies, now you bring in Gannett's, who I think is a really good replacement for Centennial Spring Lake Park. I expect them to be back in the state tournament, and a lot of it's due to her. Those are my overall thoughts, that I think she's really going to help improve this team and keep them back as title contenders. So that's kind of what I have for her. There's a couple others we could get to. Matt, I want you now to take a turn and list one of the big portal additions, big transfers you've seen this offseason.
Yeah, I think for me, one that stands out that we have not talked about already so far is Ava Moe heading from Eden Prairie to Minnetonka. Of course, that's not only a section rivalry, but a conference rivalry as well. Minnetonka lost a lot from last year's team that ended up finishing as section runner-ups in 2AA. And so they get a very talented player in Ava Moe, who I think is going to fit in really well with that Minnetonka group. And so I think when you look at the talent that they have, she's certainly near the top of that list. And obviously they do lose Sydney Boss Crone as well, who went to Shattuck St. Mary's. So Boss Crone will not be on the Skippers this year. But when you replace her with Ava Moe, it certainly softens the blow a little bit. So I think she's going to be a star this year for the Skippers.
Yeah, I think she's got all of it there. I mean, I got to see a lot of her last year. She's a very solid goal scorer. She led the Eagles in points and goals scored as an 8th grader, which I think is really impressive, no matter what team you're playing on. That's really great to see as a middle schooler. And that was the thing. I was always kind of wondering. I'm like, okay, she's an 8th grader. She's got such a promising future. Is she going to go to Minnetonka, or is she going to go to Holy Fam? That's what I was kind of thinking last year. And then to hear she goes to the Skippers, staying same section, same conference, but different team. I mean, it's kind of hard to blame her, if you ask me. But I think that's a good move and a great pickup for Minnetonka. Brandon.
Well, this one isn't quite moving next door, but Michaela Lee of Lakeville North is going to be making not making the trek. She's going to be playing, lacing them up with War Road this winter. For a War Road program, I just look at, they lost a couple heart and soul type players like Kaya Sandy, Katie Comstock, that were basically their only seniors a year ago. Those players that, led them to 3 state championships, were part of amazing teams. They can reload with bringing back almost everybody. Then you put Michaela Lee on there as well, a very talented defender with a really good shot, really, really strong skater. I know she's coming off a little bit of an injury as well, maybe missing some time last season. So we'll be hoping for a fully healthy senior year. But I think she just adds to a really deep group. And I think War Road, once again, I think after a couple of years where they had good teams, but maybe weren't mountaintop like the Riley Bart's senior year, when you could have made an argument they were the best team in the state. I think they're going to be a little bit closer to the very elite teams in AA this year. So look for a big year from Michaela Lee and the War Road Warriors.
Yeah, crazy to go from Lakeville to War Road. Yeah, that's a hike for sure. I actually called the game.
It's at least a 6-hour drive.
Oh, for sure. I mean, at this point, you might as well go and play in Canada. Yeah. Well, it's too bad. I actually called the game where she suffered that leg injury. And so I only got to see a snippet of her, but she really gets heavily involved offensively. And her skating as just a sophomore last year for Lakeville North, you could just tell was ahead of the game. She was ahead of her teammates. So I think the Warriors are getting a phenomenal player in her, and I can't wait to see what she does. Hopefully plays most of this year and can stay healthy. Here's one that I don't think is as widely known. Hazel Schenkelberg, Hopkins Park to Edina, per sources that's confirmed. She scored 26 goals last year as a true freshman for Hopkins Park. And now, I don't know, I don't think she's going to be scoring 26 in a Hornets uniform, but I think she's going to be adding to the depth and still just entering her sophomore year. I think it's a lot of promising with her future. I know we were kind of discussing before we were recording. I know maybe perceived as maybe not a great move for her. Maybe buried on the depth chart. I actually think this really could brighten her numbers and brighten her talent, and playing with some great players for Edina. And then, of course, having the experience of playing probably really good section games. And I know a favorite to win their section and make the state tournament again. I think that's going to be really good for her development skills. So she's a player that, although, again, probably won't see the numbers she put up last year, I think she'll really improve development. So I'm excited to see where her year goes. And that's kind of the last player I have to highlight. I know there's a couple others. I know the other big one, Maddie Kimbrell, Orono, Toholi fan. I kind of explained that in my Miss Hockey talk in the beginning. So I don't really want to dive deep into that. But you guys, any other transfers that you want to talk about?
Yeah, the only thing I would add, Julian, I think you look at with Schenkelberg as well. She slides into Edina, as you're saying. The Hornets actually are losing a forward who's actually going the other way, which can be, refreshing at times to see. They had a player that skated for them for a couple of years, Kayla Starr, who is now going to be actually returning to where she played her youth hockey, which is in Bloomington. So she'll be skating for the Jefferson Jaguars this year as a junior, and we'll look to add something to that group that also plays in Section 6. The other thing I was going to add on Schenkelberg, we got to see her fill in the Dangle League this summer for a few games, which is not common because that league is mostly juniors and seniors. She, being a freshman last year, was kind of playing up a year or two, and was really, really impressive and was holding her own out there. So I think she's definitely going to look good there. And it's the consolidation of power a little bit with some of these programs. I think you hit that on the head, that sort of general sentiment.
Well, I appreciate you agreeing with me, man. Yeah, Matt, any other players you want to mention?
Yeah, kind of going back to what I was mentioning earlier about Minnetonka, they also get a really good player in Carmen Benedict, who transfers over from the Shakopee Sabres of the South Suburban Conference. So that's another sectional player that was, of course, in 2AA and staying in 2AA. She was the leading scorer last year for the Sabres. So it'll be interesting to see how she fits with the amount of talent that they've got. But I think that's another really good pickup for them. And again, they lose so many seniors from a year ago. That was, tons of D1 commits left and right. So, but they're slowly starting to put the puzzle pieces together, I feel like, where they're not going to be as, further down the rankings as maybe we thought at the end of last season. They'll certainly be among the state's top AA teams. And I think Benedict will certainly have a great role there as well.
Yeah, the Skippers have a lot of shoes to fill from last year's team, and I'm sure she'll fit right into one of them wherever fits comfortable and wherever fits best for her. Now I want to talk really about, this is the bulk of the podcast, just discussing some sections and how we think it's going to turn out this year. I know last year we did a section preview once the regular season concluded, and that was really fun to kind of go take a deep dive section by section. Unfortunately, we don't have time to go through 1 through 8, A and AA, so I've handpicked 3 sections for Class A and 3 sections for AA to kind of go and let's just kind of toss it up and see, okay, what we think, who's going to really do well, who we think could maybe take the next step and make the state tournament, or who we think might return, and take a look at some of the more competitive sections. So I want to give the southwestern part of the state a little bit love. 3A, I think this is going to be a pretty nice battle between Marshall and Laverne. Marshall made the state tournament last year in 2025. That defeated a streak of, 5 seasons that Laverne made the state tournament. So I think the big question is, can Marshall do it again and go back to back, or will Laverne get back on the winning train and make it to St. Paul in 2026? I want to start right now. I think it's tough, and I think it's 2 really good quality Southern teams in Minnesota. I am going to go with the Tigers of Marshall, just because I like what I saw from them last year. You return Brooklyn Mouch, one of the state's scoring leaders. I mean, she scored 83 points last year as a sophomore heading into her junior year, and she returns her top line. They do lose a decent amount of a couple of their top defenders, which I think is going to be tough. But then you also return Lily Stelter at goal, who had a tremendous year. She started every game for the Tigers. And I think when you mix that with you have a lot of youth. I'm seeing still lots of incoming sophomores and a lot of incoming underclassmen, but I think overall, when you return that many points from a season ago, it's difficult to bet against it. And again, they were able to get over the hump last year. I don't see why they can't do it again.
Yeah, I think when you look at this Marshall team, obviously the standout is Brooklyn Mauk, who's had just a phenomenal year last year. I think she really kind of cemented herself as a name that really anybody across the state knows by now. But then I look at Laverne's roster, and it's very talented. They only lose really one of their top players from last season, which was Peyton Bear, who had 35 points last year for the Cardinals. And of course, they are led by Ellie Van Batavia, who's only going to be a sophomore this year. So Laverne looks like a team that maybe could be out for some revenge. And I can tell you that we will have Marshall's matchup against Laverne, I believe, is December 4th at Marshall. We're going to have that game as part of our Hockey Night in Minnesota on KARE 11 Plus. So I'm really interested to see how those two teams match up in the regular season. But I think when you look at Laverne, they've got the depth. Maybe Marshall has the star power a little bit more with Brooklyn Mauk. But I think it really sets up to be an intriguing section battle between those two, who almost certainly, I think, will meet in the section final.
Well, I'm glad I heard you say Mauk. I thought it was Mouch, and I appreciate you having that correct. Thank you. Brooklyn Mauk. Awesome. Brandon, your final thoughts on this section.
Yeah, I think you hit the narratives pretty well. I think Laverne is going to bring maybe just a little bit more scoring depth and not losing quite as much of their quality depth. I'll just give you a couple names to watch. Matt already mentioned Ellie Van Batavia. It's the sophomores that I want you to look out for. Van Batavia for Laverne, that name should be recognized, as her sister Cameron had an incredible prep career now at Mankato. And then everybody, like you said, Matt, starting to know Mauk, but Peyton DeMuth is going to be the other player to watch for Marshall. She's been getting some attention as well on a little bit more of a national level as well. I know, going off to some of the USA camps as well. Scored 25 goals as a freshman. Look for DeMuth to continue to rise. Look for Van Batavia, a couple sophomores to watch.
Hockey in southern Minnesota should be great. Yeah, it's awesome. I love to see it get represented, and that's why I wanted to talk to them a little bit about them on the show. Now I want to move more to the Metro Class 4A, which is arguably the most balanced section in Girls A. I think this is going to be tough. I think right now the slight edge I'm going to give to the Blake School, with Holy Angels following right behind them, and then Chisago Lakes having to be in the mix as well. I might even throw South St. Paul in there just out of respect for the Packers. This is a section that Holy Angels has won the last couple of seasons. South St. Paul won it in 2022 and 2023. This year, I think we have a good shot at having a new section title winner. When I look at the Bears of Blake, I mean, they returned just about every damn player from last year's team. And then we mentioned the Jory Jones, one of the favorites, Jeannie McGaughan, who had an incredible junior year last year. Then you look at Ella Bond, Callie Arthur, Layla Dahlem. I mean, you just returned so many points from last year. And although you don't really see, the numbers like some of these other schools, I think for a Metro team, they were still good for about a point a game. And then looking at Holy Angels from last year's state tournament bound team, they just lost so many talented players. And I think you still return a lot. Genevieve Nelson, I think the sophomore is going to have to really take a big leap and have to step up. But I think with the additional loss of Zoe Rimstead, I mean, such a big blow and again, graduation, right? That happens in high school. They can't be high schoolers forever. But I think with all the losses we're seeing the Holy Angels, and I'm sorry, Brandon, no, you're an alum. Maybe you're a little, I don't know. Hopefully you're not too biased. I think you all would agree. Lots of big losses. I still think with their state tournament experience from last year, yeah, that could definitely help them in section play. But I think when you look at, okay, who played well and who's returning from a season and go, you have to give it to Blake as the section favorite this year.
Yeah, I don't take any offense, Julian. You're absolutely right. The Stars will be breaking in a lot of new players, new head coach as well, in Jake Schumann taking over the program. I know he's familiar, I think, with a lot of the athletes. He is an employee at Holy Angels, has definitely some other coaching acumen. But one thing I think you're going to look out that I think will be key with this section, I think Blake, I love their game. Coach Christy King has done an amazing job building up this program with McGon as the backbone and some lean years for that team that they've built up. And I love what they've built. I think one thing just to keep an eye on throughout the year, Holy Angels is undoubtedly going to take their lumps as they're playing largely the same schedule as a year ago when they had a lot of senior experienced players. They might be that proverbial battle-tested type team around 500 playing their best hockey come February when they need to. There's going to be a lot of young players, but there's definitely still talent there. And if there's one thing I could give a knock on Blake that I'm interested to see what they do this year with these returners, can they score some more goals? I love their structured system they play with the incredible goaltending, but if there's one thing we know, lower scoring games lead to a little bit less margin for error. And you could lose a 1-goal game late in the season if it's low scoring. So there's question marks. I think a little bit less for Blake. So I would agree they're probably the favorites at this point. And I'm never, ever going to count out South St. Paul with Dave Palmquist behind the bench. They have a player returning back to their system this year in Paige Johnson, who played at Farmington for a couple seasons. She's going to be a really key skater for them. They have a good goaltender. Obviously, it's going to be really hard replacing Lily Pockel, who was such a unique talent in the high school game, but I am not counting out South St. Paul to make some noise.
Yeah, you can never count them out. And again, a team that I've seen them have years where, hey, they made it when I wasn't expecting them to, and I think they're always going to compete when it comes to Section time. Matt, any more additional thoughts you have on Section 4?
Yeah, I think you both kind of hit the nail on the head about just how deep this section is. And when you look at Blake, you're absolutely right, Brandon. The scoring was a little bit of a concern for them last year. Their leading scorer, Ella Bond, only had 26 points, 13 goals, 13 assists. I obviously expect that those numbers are going to increase this season, but you're right. Janie McGon is going to have to continue to be good night in and night out. And I do also think Holy Angels is a team to keep an eye on. You're right, that schedule is difficult. They lose a lot, but how do they adjust and build on that under a new head coach? So we'll see how it all turns out. But I do think Blake, the favorite right now, but as we know, there's probably 2, 3, maybe even 4 teams that could potentially come out of this section. So definitely the deepest in Class A.
No guarantees who makes it out for 4. I want to move out to 5 now, which is, I would say, in terms of top-end talent, possibly the best section out of Class A. Right now, I think people are having Orono as the favorites, which I totally understand. They've won this section 4 years in a row. Breck, I mean, the Mustangs, still a very young team. They were I'm not going to say they were as good last year as we've seen them be, maybe in the late 2010s or even the early 2020s a little bit, but I think we're seeing them kind of get back up to par. This is such a young team. I mean, I'm looking at the returners, almost all sophomores, right? I mean, the amount of freshmen that this team had is outstanding. And then you have an incoming freshman who played as an 8th grader last year, and Malinkinovich. I probably botched that, but we're going to go with her. Clara, yes. I mean, she had a great year as an 8th grader, which is great to see. The question is, okay, did they gain enough experience from last year to overcome teams like Orono and now Westonka Southwest Christian, not Mound? They took that out of their name, so just refer to as Westonka Southwest Christian. I think they do. I mean, when you return just about everybody, again, that's my little trend here. It's hard to argue against that. And then I think, too, with Orono, I think there's going to be a lot of players who step up. You do return your starting goalie and Vivian Anderson, but with the loss of your top 3 players, Lopez, Rasmussen to graduation, and then Kimbrell to Holy Fam. I mean, that is just a big blow. I do think Gabby Lopez is expected to take a big step and possibly is one of the best sophomores in the state. Alexandra Christian also to be having a great junior year as well. And I want to see some of those other players, right, who maybe didn't get a ton of playing time from last year, really adjust and get more minutes and produce for Orono. And then I look at Westonka Southwest Christian. I mean, with the exception, again, of a couple losses on their top line, they pretty much bring back everybody. But that's a team that just hasn't really been able to make it out of this section or really well for some time. I want to say they're in a different section from before, if I remember so correctly. But this is, I think, Orono's to lose. I think it really just comes down to, okay, and Breck dethrone Orono, and can they bring it back? Because they haven't seen the state tournament since 2020, since COVID. I think they can do it. I think they've got the talent to do so. However, the inexperience still in age and on the ice, I think, could hurt them down the road. Any of you guys can jump in, by the way.
I'll hop in here quick. Yeah. First off, another really good section with, I think, 3 teams that can come out of this, with, that being Orono, Breck, and West Tonka Southwest Christian. They did change the name of the school, by the way, officially, Julian. So it is just West Tonka. It's a school change, not just athletics or girls hockey thing.
Oh, literally a school change.
Yep,
Okay.
Yep. So they are officially just West Tonka High School now. Yep. So, but I look at Breck, and you mentioned the sophomores really kind of leading the way, and it's kind of been a slow and steady progression. Each year they're just getting better and better and better. And I think the question is this the year that they finally get back to the state tournament? I think it's fitting that it's kind of coincided with Blake getting better and better, because, a couple of years ago, maybe 3-4 years ago now at this point, but Breck and Blake were just awful. I mean, it was so unlike what we have seen in the past, and they've slowly gotten better and better. And now to this point, we're looking at, Breck and Blake, and we're circling that on the calendar as this is, a rivalry game, and we don't know what's going to happen between 2 of the top teams in Class A. But I look at Breck, and there's just so much talent. But I think that even if they don't get to the state tournament this year, they still have a couple more years where I think they can really find their peak a little bit, maybe in the future. So it'll be close with Orono. You can't obviously count out West Tonka. Lizzie Callahan, I think, is maybe an under the radar player that doesn't get talked about as maybe some of the other top seniors in the state. But Breck is in a good position, I think, to potentially move forward to the state tournament. But even if they don't, there's still a lot of positives to look for down the road.
Brandon, anything else you want to add about Section 5 before we move on to AA?
Yeah, Matt, you hit on an interesting thing about the trajectories of Breck and Blake have really been so parallel for the better part of a decade. And Blake beating them in all those section finals, then Blake hops up to AA. They never made the state tournament in AA before they went down. That coincides with Breck going on an incredible run in the late 2010s, but we'll save that for another day. I think this Breck team is the most talented team in terms of future Division I level type players in Class A. That's where I think they are at. But the only thing I worry about a little bit, I like this group a ton, but Matt, with that runway piece of, well, they have a couple years, will they all stick around? I think it's a fair question in a single A program. I love what Coach Loma has built there, but will they all stick around? Who knows? That said, it's a super talented team. Definitely do not count out Orono. Julian, you alluded to this, but Orono is going to have players that were down the depth chart that are going to step up. Look for the players like Lily Peck and Lauren Albrecht to score a lot this year. They're going to be a quality team. And Matt, you took a little bit of my under the radar with Lizzie Callahan. Is she really under the radar if both of us are mentioning her? But I think Callahan, as one of the top scoring defenders in the state, is going to be a Miss Hockey finalist as well. So don't count out don't count out West Tonka Southwest Christian, because after all, they did end Breck's season a year ago with that great game in the section semis.
Yeah, that was an early season loss in the sections that I honestly wasn't expecting for Breck. So we'll see. Maybe they'll try to get some revenge. Hi, buddy. My dog's trying to get my attention. We're going to move on to AA now. We're going to go stay somewhat in the metro, not really, a little bit more south. Section 1 AA. It's a section that's been ran for the most part between Farmington and Northfield. We throw in a couple of the Lakevilles there, here and there. I don't think we're going to see either of them. Maybe Lakeville South. I'd have them over North. But I think this is a section really going to be a battle between Farmington, who made it last year. Kind of similar to Breck. They're just such a young team. They don't really have a whole lot of seniors who contribute. You do lose one of your top goalies, which I think is tough, but McKenna Underwood had played a lot pretty much split it between the pipes last year for the Tigers. I think she should do just fine. And then you have Northfield, who returns just about everyone as well. And they're a lot more experienced, including one of the state's top defenders, Mia Miller, who led them in points, 31 goals, 30 assists. Wow. As a defender, that is incredible. So expect her to have a great year, maybe one of those under the radar Miss Hockey finalists. And I think especially with her being the backbone, her being a big emphasis on Northfield this year, I could see her going off for 70, maybe even 75 points, I think, which would be great to see. And again, I know it's not all about stats, but maybe we'll see her in the semifinals or even the finalists for Miss Hockey. So with her, I think she could lead this team to Northfield. I think it's really 50-50. I think it depends on, okay, can Farmington do what they did last year and win, and winning the section and making the state tournament? And they actually played a pretty good heck of a game against Edina in the quarterfinals. I mean, tough to bring down the Hornets, but hey, I mean, that's something that we could see, hey, if they could be dangerous, a kind of a dark horse in the state tournament this year, if they were to make it out of this section. But I think the only team really standing in their way is Northfield. Oh man, it's really tough. I'm going to go with Farmington just because they won it last year, but Northfield, again, I think it's really 50-50. The experience that they have and just with the level of player that Mia Miller is, I think could really help them just get over the hill and make it back to St. Paul. Either of you guys want to chip in on this section?
Yeah, on Northfield, it's going to be the goaltender. They're going to have to replace Macy Mueller. I don't quite know what their plan is there. And Mueller was a really solid few-year starter for them. But you're right, they bring back a really solid group of returners. It's going to be another good year for Northfield. I just think their schedule really does hurt them in their conference, unfortunately. Farmington playing in the South Suburban, I think they will be the best team in the South Suburban this year. The South Suburban's going to be down just a little bit from what we've seen after Rosemount lost a lot and a couple other teams. But if you follow this Farmington group for a couple of years, they came up through the youth. They were a really tight group. They've kept it mostly together, which is awesome. Julian, I'm glad you highlighted that state tournament game because I saw them, their first big test of the year. We had just ranked them, I think, in our rankings. They went to Benilde and got their doors blown off. Wasn't even competitive. They come back against another 6A school in the state tournament and scoreboard-wise kept it close. So I like Farmington to build on last year. I think they're set for a big year. And my favorite player on this team to watch has been Taylor Risch. Just a super, super good 200-foot player. Think a little bit like Edina's Lorelei Nelson. Just a really solid physical presence, chipped in 20 goals to boot to tie for the team lead. And I think Farmington will just build on last year and have a big year.
Yeah, we'll see. I mean, again, you could be very right, or maybe Northfield could do it. We'll see. Matt, any more thing you want to add?
Yeah, I was just going to say, I think with Northfield, you look at last year's Northfield team, it was sort of a rebuilding year for them, right? They lose Ayla Puppy, of course, who won the Miss Hockey Award a couple seasons ago. So they were definitely down last year. But with them bringing back so much, it starts to make me wonder if they're going to continue to build off of the success that they had. And they did have 11 losses last year, which for them is definitely very high. But, I do think Farmington, I think, is the front runner right now. And of course, you have I think it's the Gobblers. Is that how you say the last names of the twins on Farmington that were the leading scorers? They'll be sophomores this year. And I think just bringing back everybody from a team that already went to the state tournament. Maybe they were a bit ahead of schedule last year getting to the state tournament, but I think that the Tigers will go back to the state tournament. And it'll be really interesting to see how they gel throughout the course of the year and maybe how they fit in with some of those other top teams in AA. I think they're probably in that second tier, not maybe elite quite yet as some of these other teams that we've talked about, but they're going to be a fun team to watch this year, just south of the Twin Cities area.
Hockey is prevalent not just in Metro and northern Minnesota. It's also there in the South. Can't wait to see hopefully one of those two teams make it, and hey, maybe they'll upset their way through a quarterfinal game this next year. We're going to move on to Section 2, kind of the more the West Metro at this point. I think it's down to Minnetonka and Holy Fam, which it's kind of been like that for a while. It was Minnetonka's to take, and then the Fire for the first time in school history shocked the world. Brandon, you got the honor to be the voice of that game on Minnesota Hockey TV. I know we touched on that last year in our state tournament preview show. If you want to talk about that game, you could, but I know that was huge for the Fire for sure. And the Fire continues to grow. They return pretty much everybody except for Josie Lynn. That's a pretty big hit, as well as Casey Cronin. But then you get the addition of Kimbrell, who's arguably the number one player to switch schools this year. Kayla Swartout should be one of the top goalies in AA this year. And then you still return so many, and this is such an experienced team. Lots of seniors. You do have, a handful of underclassmen, but just a heavy group at senior, and they play such a tough schedule. And I think that's what's really going to help them out. Again, I don't expect them to necessarily go, 24-0, 25-0 in the regular season, but I would expect somewhere around maybe 20 wins, high teens wins for them. But playing all those top-notch Class A and AA teams, I think, is really going to help them prepare for sections. I expect them to make the section final, most likely against Minnetonka. But although Minnetonka does reload with some nice transfers, and of course, it's just Minnetonka, great youth program. They're always going to have girls coming up who always make an impact, but just with the experience that Holy Family has and the talent that they have at goalie and with their forwards, I don't see why they can't do it again. And hey, they won a playoff game last year, a state tournament game, which I didn't expect them to do. I think right now you have to put them not only as my personal section favorite, they might be a favorite to win the whole dang thing, maybe a state champ favorite. I don't know. We'll see. That's just my thoughts. Guys, I want you guys to chime in here. We have one more section to go, and then we will discuss a few state championship contenders from each class. So, Brandon, Matt, take it away.
Yeah, what I'll add to that, I just think you look at the kind of the three components you need in a championship team. You have your forwards, your defense, and your goaltender, and Holy Family checks all those boxes. We've seen Kayla Swartout continually get better each season in her high school career. In fact, they've got her future goaltender that will take her place as well after. We can touch on that another time. But Swartout, obviously, in goal. You have the great defense in Katya Sander, who's been great, of course, committed to the Golden Gophers. The forwards, getting Maddie Kimbrell is just such a huge boost for Holy Family. And I look at that roster and I think it's just going to be so hard to beat them, especially, given what they were able to do last year as well. And getting to the state tournament, such a huge confidence boost for that program who had been knocking on the door for so long. Obviously, Minnetonka is going to be great too, right? We know that they have the talent, but, they do lose a couple of key players, including Sydney Boss-Crone, who moves on. We mentioned going to Shattuck St. Mary's this year. So it does make me wonder, how Minnetonka will fit in with that Holy Family team. But I do look at Holy Family as the favorite in the section. I know that there was some controversy last year. We didn't rank them inside the Care 11 top 11 to start the year. This year, they're going to be right near the very top. So very impressive group that they've assembled at Holy Family. And that's going to be a really, really fun team to watch. They're my pick to win that section over Minnetonka.
And you can watch all their home games live on Minnesota Hockey TV. Not sponsored, by the way, but just shouting them out right now. Brandon, any last words on Section 2 AA?
Yeah, I might get a little ahead of myself here, but I think Holy Family and Centennial really kind of paralleled each other in a lot of ways in terms of their roster construction. You could look at losing your best player, but then replacing them in theory, and also bringing back a ton and bringing back a goaltender. So perhaps it's fitting that they're scheduled to play 4 times this season out of 25 games. Yes, you heard that right. 4 times. They drew each other in the first round of the Walzer as well. So we'll get to see Centennial and Holy Family locking up quite a bit. Maybe we'll get a 5th come state tournament time, but I think we absolutely would be wrong to count out Minnetonka. This is clearly going to be a talented team. They're going to be younger. And for the first time, probably ever, it will be Holy Family viewed as that preseason favorite. I think we might have even said that, had Minnetonka gotten the better of Holy Family last year in that section final. The talent edge is going to be with the Fire, and that is saying something. They've been neck and neck, but I think Holy Family definitely is a little bit more talented. One team I also want to just shout out. It's tough going into the season in a section with two teams that are so clearly the favorites, but look for Prior Lake to have a really good year. They return 8 of their 10 leading scorers from a year ago, all of whom are still juniors and sophomores. So they could be looking at a good couple year run here as the Lakers, especially with EP and Shakopee rebuilding a little bit more. So I think the Lakers are a pretty clear 3 seed. I've had the honor of calling their section quarterfinal 3 years in a row when they were the 4 seed. So I'm hoping maybe they can bump up the seeding line a little bit this year.
I think it's certainly possible. And hey, whoever gets that 2 seed in that section, whether it's Minnetonka or Holy Family, I don't think you're going to want to play the Lakers in a sudden death game in the semifinals. I want to go give some love to the North. We've talked a lot about the South. We talked about the Metro, but I want to go move to 8AA, a section that has been kind of all over the place. I mean, we've had Roseau and Moorhead mixed in, Brainerd Little Falls, of course, but there's a team that I think is a bit underrated heading into this year, who returns just about everybody from last year's squad, who I think can win this section. That's the Bemidji Lumberjacks, who feature one of the state's best goal scorers in Bailey Rupp. I've gotten to see her play a couple of times now. I remember when she came down here to Buffalo, she went on a tear. I mean, she's got an incredible shot. Like, her shot is ridiculous. If you guys get to tune in to any Bemidji Lumberjacks games, keep an eye out on her. I think Bemidji can win this section. I know Moorhead is going to probably be the favorite again, but it's like, I just look at their team. I look at the Spuds. You lose Crescent to graduation. She was a phenomenal goaltender. And then you lose Olivia Corton. Yes, Olivia Corton. She was their leading scorer last year. She had 47 points for the Spuds. And they lose a lot of their depth, and mainly you get your top line and then your fourth line that's going to really have to step up. And with the loss of your goalies, I think it's going to be really difficult. And then I just look at Bemidji, and you have another player who I think it's overshadowed a little bit, junior defender, Millie Knott, who was tied second in goals scored and second in points for Bemidji last year. I expect her to have a really good year. And Bemidji, kind of like a lot of these teams that we're discussing, they're pretty young. I think the only issue they're going to have is you have Ava Prickett, who's possibly going to be the starting goalie. She's going to be a sophomore this year. She didn't appear in any game last year. So I think that might be where they struggle a little bit. I know Roseau, a team that you always have to respect. They lost a couple of their top players, but Jasmine Havda, a Miss Hockey candidate for sure, I think could really leap into a mega role for the Rams this year. And then you also return Madeline LaSalle at goal, who I was really impressed. I got to call a handful of Roseau games when they came down here to the metro area. And she's really solid for sure. So I think Roseau, and they bring back a lot of experience too. I think it's going to be kind of a 3-headed monster, but I'm going to go with the unpopular vote out of this section, and I've got Bemidji making the state tournament.
I like it, and I would be very happy. I mean, Bailey Rupp is a player. If you ever get to call Bemidji games, she's always got a smile on her face down on the ice. Just one of those types of players. Committed to the University of Minnesota Duluth. She'll be off to Canada early next year as part of the U18 team, which is awesome. A well-earned honor. Havda, I mentioned earlier my Miss Hockey pick. Bailey Rupp's going to be in it next year. But Julian, I think it's going to stay in Moorhead. I think the section goes through Moorhead. I know they have a goaltender to replace, but I think the identity of how they play under Ryan Kraft, they'll find some depth in that program. And they have a quartet of some underrated players. I think they went under the radar, just how good they were a year ago. Haley Melquist, Shea Benson, Anna Bjorkman, a trio of forwards who all scored double-digit goals. Lucy Wilson, who's going to lead their blue line, is committed to the juggernaut of Division III hockey, UW River Falls. I just think that quartet and a little bit of depth is going to push Moorhead over the top. If I could shout out one, though, Julian, I know this is going to be close to your heart. Buffalo is going to have a good year this year. I think it's a team to watch. They're returning some solid players. Actually, they're returning a lot. They are going to be losing their goaltender, who was, I know, phenomenal. But also, this one hits a little close in the family as well. But Buffalo's 15A team was pretty darn good last season. They made a state tournament run. So there's going to be a quick infusion of talent into the high school team. Buffalo is going to be frisky in this section. So you're right. 8A is going to be good. don't count out Alexandria. They've had some good 15A teams in the last few years. I think Brainerd Little Falls is going to be down a little bit. St. Cloud even has a couple of solid talents led by Reese Ruska. So this is going to be a really fun section. I think every game is going to be really competitive when these teams go head to head. And the great news is they almost always play every team in the section every year. So we have some good games to look forward to here.
Yeah, it's really cool how this section, I feel like, is known for making sure they play each other in the regular season. And thanks for the shout out for Buffalo. Yeah, I don't know how many games I'll be calling for them this year. I got to call a lot of their games last year and a handful of their away games too. They return a lot. And like you said, Brandon, 15A team for youth, they made the state tournament. They've got a number of young girls going to come up, and then you look at this pretty experienced team coming in for the Bison. Yeah, we'll see if they can make an impact as well out of the section. Matt, to close it out before we move into our state championship contenders.
Yeah, this is another really intriguing section where I think that whoever comes out of this section, I think, has a real chance to make some noise at the state tournament. And I say that because I look at some of these schedules that these teams play, and it is loaded, especially Bemidji and Moorhead. I'm looking at Moorhead's schedule. They play Heel Murray, they play Minnetonka, they play Benilde, and it's really sort of the same thing with Bemidji, who also plays a lot of those same teams. Obviously, they're going to play Moorhead a couple of times, I believe, and then they play, Warroad, Holy Family. They play Hill Murray, Moorhead, like we mentioned. They'll play River Cities, who is the newly rebranded River Cities. They, of course, were formerly known as Champlain Park Coon Rapids. The Bluebirds, which I thought was a great name. Now the Blades. I do think the logo is very cool, though, if you get a chance to see that. But going back to the 8AA, I do think it's a very competitive section. I do worry a little bit about Bemidji's goaltending, how they're going to replace that. But you look at the talent, maybe they're still a year away from getting to the state tournament. But I do think Moorhead probably the favorite right now. They will also have goaltending to replace. So I think the big question is who's going to be that goaltender that steps up in this section. But overall, this is going to be a fun battle to watch. And of course, never can count out the Roseau Rams, who have been to the state tournament recently as well. So really a 3-team race, I think, between Roseau, Moorhead, and Bemidji. But like you said, Buffalo could be a team that maybe upsets one of those top teams in the section playoffs. So we'll have to see how it pans out.
I feel like in this section for boys and girls, we've seen upsets happen. We've seen some of those northern teams, not too often, but we've seen the Roseaus and the Moorheads go down early. So you never know in high school hockey. And then
we had the boys Buffalo Elk River section final a couple years ago, right?
Yes, yes. I remember Moorhead lost in the semifinals for the first time, and they didn't make a section final for the first time in 20-something years. I mean, ridiculous how dominant.
And then they followed it up by winning the state championship finally. So it worked out for them, huh?
Moorhead's a crazy team, yeah. And hey, for boys fans, Brandon Mickelson officially returning to the Spuds. He will not pursue his next year in the WHL. He'll be going back to Moorhead. So really cool to see there. Lots of talent out of Moorhead, Minnesota. And then our final segment, our Class A and Class AA state championship contenders. We only have a few minutes left. I'm just going to kind of highlight Class A. I think it's a 2-horse race between Warroad and Dodge County. However, if I had to list one, I'm going to give it to Warroad because there's a lot of reasons, but I think the solo reason is the loss of Ida Huber. I think she was just a big reason of this Dodge County's team for the past couple of years. And with the loss of her, I think is going to be really tough. And I just don't know if they can beat Warroad in the state tournament. I think it would be cool to see them in another state championship game, but I do like Warroad, Breck, Orono, whoever makes it out of that section. Maybe Westonka Southwest Christian could make some noise. I don't think Breck is old enough really to bring down a Dodge County, a Warroad team. But out of Class A, yeah, I think Warroad, they just have too many good players. And with Rowley at net, she's incredible. So that's my Class A state champ. Long season ahead. So this is all speculation. I want to get your guys' thoughts before we get to 2A and then wrap up.
Yeah, I think if you're going on just pure talent of the roster, I think Warroad and Breck would be my state championship game. Not saying that that's going to happen, but I think those are the two most talented teams. And I would probably lean Warroad a little bit for that experience. But as I mentioned earlier, I really do think that the Mustangs have the most talented roster in this class. It's can they put it together? I think they are capable. It's going to be interesting to watch as the season goes on.
Matt.
Yeah, I think, the defending state champs, right? Dodge County, we can't count them out. Obviously, they do lose some key players from last year's team, including Ida Huber, who you mentioned. That's going to be a huge, huge loss for them. But I do still think that they're going to be a top 5, maybe even top 3, 2 team in state this year. And I do think they obviously have a very difficult schedule this year as well. They really loaded up. They get Minnetonka to come to Dodge County. Last year, those two teams tied in the regular season. That'll be an intriguing game to watch. So I'm not counting out Dodge County by any means. But I do think, like Brandon said, based on talent, Warroad gets the edge. They get Michaela Lee, big boost in the transfer portal. But it's going to be fun to see those two teams potentially maybe meeting again in the state title game. We'll see what happens. Everybody's obviously got to get to the state tournament first. But there's a lot of really talented teams in Class A, highlighted, I think, by the Warroad Warriors, who are going for their 4th title in 5 years.
I'm going to go move on to AA now. Hill Murray, the state champs from last year, who we didn't really get to talk a whole lot about in this episode. They return a lot from a season ago, and they return their top line, who are all going to be juniors. However, I think they've lost a couple of big players. I know you lost Josie Skugman, a player who doesn't really get involved on the stat sheet, and I shout out to her. I got to have her on the podcast last year. She's a really good defender now at St. Thomas. But I think just in terms of pure defense, she was one of the best defenders in the state of Minnesota. Just you don't really see her get involved with goals and assists a whole lot. And with Centennial Spring Lake Park, I mean, I think they're playing with a chip on their shoulder. Last year being upset in the quarterfinals to Rosemount, a game that I think a lot of people expected the Cougs to win. And again, playing in a tough section out of 5 AA, which I think has a number of sleepers out of that section. River Cities, Maple Grove, North Wright County is always competitive. However, I like them to make it out of their section. I think they should have no problem making the state tournament. But now having that experience playing on the big stage, I think will do them justice. I'm picking them as my state champion. However, I think this is a little bit more open versus Class A. It's a lot of Dodge County or Warroad I'm hearing. With AA, Hill Murray, I think, is a good pick, but also teams like Edina Taka, you can never count them out. And then Holy Fam, of course, I think is a pretty big favorite. But I like what Centennial Spring Lake Park's got cooking. I think they, with the transfer, with the returners, with pretty much everybody coming back from last year, I think it'll do them justice. And they're my pick for AA. You guys, let's hear it.
I'll hop in here. I'm going to go with Holy Family. I do think last year was just a huge step for them to just get to the state tournament. Not only did they get to the state tournament, they took 3rd place, got a win over Moorhead in the quarterfinal round. And I'm looking at this team, and they check all the boxes of a state tournament winner potentially. And of course, it's going to be really a good year, I think, for AA, because normally at the start of the year, we have maybe a team or two that comes and we say it's probably one of these two teams. But I think you look at this year in AA, I mean, you've got, of course, the defending champs, Hill Murray, who we can't count out ever. Last year, we wondered, was their goaltending going to be the reason they didn't win the state title? Well, they proved us wrong in that regard. And then, of course, you got Centennial Spring Lake Park, who's going to be really fun to watch. You've got Holy Family, Edina, Minnetonka, Benilde, Maple Grove. Maybe some of those teams that come in and potentially could win it all. But I like the way that Holy Family is constructed. Obviously, I think the difference that pushes them over the edge is the addition of Maddie Kimbrell. Obviously, a player who's going to be so fun to watch. But yeah, I'm going to go with Holy Family. But I do think that this year it's wide open on the girls' side in AA.
And that's why we love it, right? It's wide open. It's hard to guess. It's hard to really get your picks right. Brandon, yeah, let's hear it, baby.
Well, I think that there's a group of 4 teams that I think I would stand just a little bit above the rest. That said, they're all going to face a tough game in their section to get to the state tournament, which is what we love about it. Hill Murray, I think a player to look out for this year is Addie McLay, the Ohio State commit. She was also named on that U18 team with both Skoogman and, oh, I'm blanking on the name. It was the Josies, Skoogman and
Gwen, her sister.
No. They had two defenders, but anyway, yes. So Hill Murray, McLay set to have a big year. They're going to need a couple others to step up as well, like Talon Engelhart, who is a absolute mountain of a defender at well over 6 foot before she's on her skates. That said, if I'm going with who I think the two best teams are as we start the season, with some late information, shall we say, coming in, I'm going to go with Centennial and Edina to reach the state championship game. I love how these rosters are constructed. I love how they're coached as well. Holy Family is right there. They are right there. I think they play a similar style to both of those teams, whereas Hill Murray is a little bit more of the run and gun style, which is a nice foil to have as well. I think those four teams are a cut above the rest. That said, if we saw Benilde or Maple Grove or Minnetonka at the state tournament in a quarterfinal, I wouldn't really be that surprised either. So it is going to be a good year, and looking forward to it. Centennial or Edina, I don't know. That's really, really hard to pick between those two, but I think that's who will be in the championship.
Hard to count on Edina. No matter what you throw at them, it seems like they always overcome it, and they win. That's what they do there. All right, guys. Well, we're gonna leave you with that. If you made it this far, wow, go you. Appreciate it. A special thanks to you, Matt and Brandon, taking time out of your nights to give me your valued input. And as always, I hope you watching. I hope you guys are doing well, and we appreciate you tuning in. This is the season preview of Minnesota high school girls hockey here in the state of Minnesota. I'm Julian Lockhart, your host. So long. See you next time. Okay, all right, let's stop that.